Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Vishakanvitanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyev Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikesha Indriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibhatatmane Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchi Sade Namaha Namahiranya Vedyaya Chaturhotraya Tantave. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing a discussion of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Specifically, in the previous session, we stopped in the middle of chapter 18, which is quite an intense chapter because it actually begins the Srimad Bhagavatam. It begins the Srimad Bhagavatam. It sets the stage for the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then we notice towards the end of the previous session, there was a verse where Srila Sutta Goswami, who was the actual speaker, because he was rendering the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam as he heard from Srila Sukadeva Goswami. So he heard from Sukadeva Goswami and he became the secondary speaker where he was rendering the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, what is very significant when we ended the previous session? Sri Sutta Goswami says, O God, although we are born in a mixed caste, we are still promoted in birthright simply by serving and following the great who are advanced in knowledge. Even by conversing with such great souls, one can without delay cleanse oneself of all disqualifications resulting from lower births. This is how the previous session ended, where he practically, before he speaks on this extraordinary topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, he is practically stepping away and allowing transcendence to pass through by completely calling himself unqualified in one sense, because he says, I was not born in a certain community. I was not born in a traditional family which is steeped in tradition. I was born to parents who are not so qualified to give me an environment, to give me the situation for me to study Srimad Bhagavatam. However, because I came in touch with great personalities who are rendering Srimad Bhagavatam, great personalities who are speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, and those who are very qualified, I became purified and I became qualified to be able to share Srimad Bhagavatam. So what is it which we specifically notice? You see, we all, practically everyone in the movement of Lord Chaitanya has the role of a preacher. One may not necessarily preach, but they would be facilitating the preaching movement in so many different ways. So that is also counted as preaching because we are facilitating the preaching. But what is it which is the signature quality of those who are extraordinarily qualified and who are very successful in our movement? The definition of success in our movement is not so much measured by the factors of success that we normally see in the material world. The factors of success in the material world is vast many followers. It could be material opulences. It could be infrastructure. It could be position. It could be many other things that are very tangible. These are very visible traits of those in the material world who are in position and who have been successful. In our movement, there is a quality which is not exactly this. Our measurement of whether we are making a difference or whether we are on the right track is not to be measured by the number of followers. It is not to be measured by the opulences that we attract and so on and so forth. In the preaching moment of Lord Chaitanya, the only quality which really matters is whether, when we engage in the service of the Lord, we are deepening our own faith. Everyone who is, in fact, being a part of this movement is only in this movement to deepen their faith. They are not in the business of doing anything else. Our goal is Krishna consciousness. Our goal is not to preach. Okay? This is the preaching moment of Lord Chaitanya. But if we have the objective of wanting to serve Lord Chaitanya and wanting to deepen our experience and our faith, automatically we become a part of his mission and he uses us as instruments. Those who literally have a desire to drop everything and want to make progress in Lord Chaitanya's movement will become instruments, and they come out as preachers. They come out as transformers. They come out as people who are generally being able to affect the lives and then being able to transform the lives of others. Why is it so? It is because their faith is deepening as they go deeper and deeper into the process. That deepening of their faith allows them to be used by Lord Chaitanya. In reality, no one is capable of speaking the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are only capable of deepening our faith in the sense that we are situated to deepen our faith. And by deepening our faith, we actually become qualified to become instruments. So we are instruments, and that qualification of becoming instrument is to be used by Lord Chaitanya, and that is the success, which is the measuring rod of success in Krishna consciousness. The measuring rod of success in Krishna consciousness has nothing to do with normally assumed parameters. So here we notice Srila Sutta Goswami setting the stage for the discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam, and before he sets the stage, he talks about his obvious disqualification. By talking about his disqualification very sincerely, he is practically understanding that this task is insurmountable. This task is far beyond his capacity. And as a consequence, unless he steps aside and unless he moves aside, he has to be used by the Supreme Lord so that he could glorify the Srimad Bhagavatam. Not anybody can glorify Srimad Bhagavatam. We have to be able to step aside and allow the parampara to use us, step aside and allow Krishna to be able to empower us in so many different ways so that we could speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that was the concluding message from the previous week, where we started out by understanding that to learn Srimad Bhagavatam and to be able to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam and to facilitate the learning and speaking of Srimad Bhagavatam by offering different services, all of these are categorized under preaching. The preaching mission of Lord Chaitanya is completely dependent on his mercy. We are instruments. Our qualification as instruments is to really be able to deepen our own faith. As we go along serving, we ought to be able to examine our faith and to see if we have deepened our faith. If our faith has not deepened, and instead we have become completely caught up in the so-called success, which is in reality, a matter of being a part of something which is already being put in motion, then we are in trouble. So it is very important for everyone who is a part of this mission to constantly be able to reflect inward and to measure their own success. And our own success is to see if our faith has deepened. Okay? Now, let's begin this chapter. Begin the concluding part. The concluding part is where Parikshit Maharaj, who is a pure devotee of the Lord, who had the greatest good fortune of actually receiving a body made by and actually given by the Lord, because the Brahmastra practically would have destroyed the fetus in the womb of his mother. But the Lord protected and Lord ensured that he had a body which was able to survive the Brahmastra. So this was the potency of Parikshit Maharaj. Quite a phenomenal personality, quite a pure devotee because he was such an instrument. Now we also notice that it is so unusual to become a part of history as he became a part of history. He became a part of history where he glorified the process of Shravanam, hearing. The most critical aspect of devotional service is Shravanam. No one can engage in Kirtan without Shravanam. And without Shravanam and Kirtan, there is no question of Smaranam. There is no question of being able to remember. Kirtan can only be done by those who are engaging in Shravanam. Kirtan includes speaking, and Kirtan also includes the glorification of the holy names. But it is Shravanam which actually gives us the empowerment. No one can do that without Shravanam. Now, he particularly is exemplary in being able to focus on the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam for 7 days. He receives his instruction. He receives a glorious spiritual master such as Srila Sukadev Goswami, and then spends the last part of his life in such deep concentration. Such an unusual personality who created and became a part of history. He actually practically facilitated the Srimad Bhagavatam just as much as his grandfather Arjuna facilitated Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna was put into illusion deliberately by Yogamaya, and he facilitated the rendering of the Bhagavad Gita by Krishna himself. Parikshit, on the other hand, is being put into illusion by Yogamaya, and he is facilitating the actual rendering of Srimad Bhagavatam. So quite a historical personality. So it is quite astonishing to see how the time factor, which is being actually controlled by the internal potency of the Lord in the case of the devotees, is practically being used to bring the devotees closer to their mission. You see, if Parikshit Maharaj had not inadvertently become quite thirsty and hungry on that particular day, he would not have been disturbed enough to have been disturbed by the apparent disregard of his presence by Shamika Rishi. So those of you who are probably not familiar with the story, Parikshit Maharaj is out hunting, which is completely sanctioned in the scriptures for Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriyas have to practice their archery, they have to practice their skills for them to be ready. So he is a Kshatriya, he's a king, and he is out there hunting. And while he is hunting, he actually is imposed upon by material energy with great hunger and unbearable thirst. This is very unusual because a pure devotee is not put into such situations. They can never be put into such situations. They cannot. Because the conditioning of the body and the weakness of the body cannot bring them to such a state that they disregard the normal state of behavior. But in Parikshit Maharaj's case, he was overwhelmed by his body, by the design of the Supreme Lord. By Krishna's arrangement, he was overwhelmed. He was overwhelmed when he became so hungry and so thirsty, and it was unbearable. This condition of unbearable hunger and thirst is not the condition of pure devotees. It doesn't happen. They have the ability to tolerate. They have the ability to tolerate. More importantly, they don't get affected by bodily afflictions. It's very rare for them to get into this. So this was completely an arrangement of providence that he becomes afflicted by hunger, he becomes afflicted by thirst. And then as he wanders around in the forest, he comes across and then walks into the ashram of Shamika Rishi. There, the sage Shamika Rishi is a very, very elevated soul. He comes in the very great lineage of Angira Rishi, Angira Muni, and he was quite accomplished. And he was sitting in the yogic trance, meditating on the Supreme Lord. So his yogic trance was also so very deep that his senses had been withdrawn. He was completely oblivious to the surroundings. So he was deeply absorbed in activity where he did not really notice who was coming. What happened then? What happened then was that Parikshit Maharaj becomes infuriated, thinking that this personality is deliberately ignoring me. Even if he does not have much to offer, he should at least offer a seat, he should offer some water, he should be able to speak kindly. He does not do any of this. He's sitting there. Maybe he's doing this because he thinks that I'm a Kshatriya who is lower in standing and status compared to him who is a Brahmana. So he's doing this because he has this affliction in his mind that I am a Kshatriya, I am low born compared to him. So he's deliberately being discriminatory. This behavior is deliberate, this insult is deliberate. So Parikshit Maharaj, he becomes quite infuriated. Now this is a second instance which can never happen to a pure devotee. Being put into a conditioning of envy. This is enviousness, where we are looking at someone and making assumptions that they are thinking this and they're thinking that and they're thinking this, and then they are behaving as if they are this caste consciousness or body consciousness. So we are accusing someone else of body consciousness. This is enviousness. This is again a condition, internal condition, which can never come upon a pure devotee. It cannot. So this is again an imposition by Yogamaya. What happened? He gets infuriated to such an extent, Parikshit Maharaj, that thinking in fury, he walks away and then looks at a dead snake. A snake is dead, he picks it up and then he puts it around the neck of Shamika Rishi as if it's a garland. In terms of, returning the favor, insult. So this is surely a despicable act. There's no doubt, there's no doubt that Parikshit Maharaj acted far beneath his station. But what is unusual is the conditioning. The conditioning of his body of unbearable hunger, unbearable thirst, and then anger, envy. These are all situations which are completely out of the ordinary, and they have been engineered specifically by the servants of the Supreme Lord. It have been engineered by Sri Yogamaya, where she is trying to draw Parikshit Maharaj closer to the Supreme Lord. So she does this, and then as a consequence, he particularly picks up the snake and then puts it around and he walks away. Now, while this incident is happening, someone informs a very young son of the Brahmana, Shamika Rishi. There is a very young son who is considered to be quite young and immature, and his name is Shringi. Someone informs his son that your father has been insulted by the king. Now, the son, who seems to be quite immature, utters a curse, and the curse itself is completely disproportionate to the activity which was performed by Parikshit Maharaj. The disproportionate nature was he practically touches water and then says that within a certain period of time, this king, who is acted out of such pride, who is not even supposed to enter the door because he should understand who is a master and who is a servant. The king is a servant of the Brahmanas. He should not be entering into the ashram. He should be, like a dog. A dog is not supposed to be seeking to sit in the same level as the master. So this is a Brahmana. Now, this is the first instance of Kali's advent. Kali is beginning to enter, where casteism, the unnatural casteism, or the pseudo-casteism, the pseudo-division which occurs in India and Vedic society, began with Shringi. It was this failure of a Brahmana, where the Brahmana himself thought he was qualified by birth, but he was very potent because he was born to a father who was very potent. And as a consequence, what did he do? He touches water and he curses Parikshit Maharaj. He curses that you should be bitten by a snake bird. So he makes it even more tougher. It should be a snake bird, a snake that can access you, can come to you, they can bite you and take your life. And you will die. So he pronounces this curse, a Brahmana who is not in touch with scripture. If a Brahmana is not in touch with scripture and is immature, then these actions are done in ignorance. And this action of being done in ignorance specifically signifies that the Brahmanical action done by Shringi was the collapse of Vedic society, the beginning of Vedic society in Vedic India. So the so-called pseudo-caste system, where the whole purpose of starting to discriminate and think one is qualified, one is unqualified by nature of their birth, begins with Shringi. That is where Kali enters. The personality of Kali specifically enters and makes Shringi his instrument as well. He had his immaturity. He had the circumstances. He had the power, Brahmanical power, born out of austerity, born out of piety, inherited through a lineage which was very powerful. Being in an environment, he was very qualified, but he was not qualified and he was not acting according to Shastra. Shastra is very clear. One never curses or removes a king. A monarchy, a kingdom ruled by a king, a just king, specifically someone who is like Parikshit Maharaj. In fact, in the purports, Srila Prabhupada writes, the potency of Shringi as a Brahmana is itself a testament that Parikshit Maharaj was a great king. Because Parikshit Maharaj was a great king, there was an environment where the Brahmanas could thrive. You see, Brahmanical knowledge does not thrive in industrial society because no one respects the Brahmanas. But if a king can create an environment where the Brahmana can be protected in a proper way, the Brahmana does not have to put in the same level of effort as a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and they can energize themselves and they can focus on building Shastric knowledge. Right? They can build Shastric knowledge. How does this Shastric knowledge, how is this austerity and power come to Shringi? It comes because there were kings like Parikshit Maharaj ruling the planet. They were able to provide the collective environment, the consciousness. He was responsible for collective consciousness, the king. He was able to arrest the miscreants. He was able to arrest activity which was non-conducive to devotional service. The Brahmana then was able to cultivate knowledge. So the power which the Brahmana had was indeed contributed quite heavily by the king as well. So in that sense, the monarchy, even you would talk to even a general person who has understood philosophy, who has understood political science, they would agree that a monarchy is the best form of ruling, provided you have a king who is in touch with Shastra. It is the best form. Even a miscreant, someone who is misguided as a monarch, is better than a democratic arrangement. So this is being seen. The reason is that in Srimad Bhagavatam, you notice Vena. Vena, before the arrival of Prithu, Maharaj Prithu, Vena was a cruel king. We will be reading about it further. Vena was a very cruel king. He subjected people to all kinds of tribulations. However, the rishis were very hesitant, the brahmanas were very hesitant to remove him from power. And the reason they were very hesitant was because if you remove the king from power, there's a vacuum that is created. That vacuum can be occupied by thieves. The miscreants can occupy in such a vacuum, and then they can cause chaos in the government. They can cause chaos in the lives of people. Now, that particular statement and the fear which was given out by Shamika Rishi, that by taking out a very powerful king and by cursing him, you have done a great mistake. He tells his son, you have done such a great mistake. This is actually very insignificant. This insult is very insignificant. There was no need to punish him with death because you really removed a ruler who was extraordinarily munificent and beneficial to the planet. It is because of him that Vedic society was thriving. Now you have removed him. He is a Raja Rishi. Right? This particular statement was made, and the fear that was felt by Shamika Rishi for the advent of miscreants and thieves was recently experienced in so many different nations. Recently, in the last 4 years, there was this whole phenomenon called the Arab Spring. We might have read about it. The Arab Spring is where it started out with removing of Saddam Hussein from his position. The moment they removed him and they replaced the fellow with the so-called democratic president, the people who actually took power now in Iraq are the rebels, the Islamic terrorists. Now the same thing was repeated by the US government in Libya. They toppled Muammar Gaddafi. They removed Gaddafi from power. And that power vacuum which was created by the US toppling Gaddafi was occupied by the Islamic terrorists. Now, second, this is again the second incident in the last 4 years. The third was there are governments in Egypt and in Syria which are practically on the brink of collapse because the rulers, even though they were tyrants, were actually minimized and removed by external force. So when a ruler who is a monarch, even though he may be cruel, he may be quite a tyrant, when he is displaced by a weaker head of government, then the miscreants and the thieves and all the elements which are very inimical to society would start occupying the position. It was seen, it is now even being seen that it's a huge problem. All the problems in the Middle East over the last 4 years were due to the phenomenon of trying to change the regime change by the US and others, the allied forces, thinking that that's going to benefit them, but it's not, because whoever occupied those positions were in fact quite the opposite. Okay, so anyway, the point which we're trying to make here is that the monarchy is indeed the best form of government, provided the king is guided and ruled and given a place in society by Shastra. By Shastra, he is ruled by Shastra, or rather he is dominating the kingdom because he has complete understanding of Shastra. It's quite rare these days to have such a king, but it is indeed a very effective form of government if such a thing ever happens, because then you have a very good understanding of the future of the nation. Anyway, so going back to this particular circumstance, Parikshit Maharaj was displaced. He was displaced by Shringi, and the fear that was coming in the heart of Shamika Rishi was that this was something which is going to alter the nature of consciousness in the entire planet, because you're removing someone who is very good, who is very effective, and then you're replacing him, we do not know with whom, and as a consequence, now we are going to pay the price. It is like the king who is doing the duty is literally to be considered the personality of God, the representative of God. And he was. Parikshit Maharaj was doing his duty. He was. And he was doing it in an exemplary form. Until his presence, Kali had no way of entering. So this breakdown of Vedic society started with the curse of a Brahmana. It was a Brahmanical failure which started the collapse of Vedic society, starting with Shringi's curse. He removes Parikshit Maharaj, and then everything else just falls apart. That is the advent of Kali. That is a real advent of Kali, is where Brahmanical culture or Brahmanas, they qualify themselves by birth, but they don't qualify themselves by actual devotional service. And Parikshit Maharaj was a Vaishnav. He was superior. He was far superior in station. He was a pure devotee. He was a Vaishnav. What to say of Brahmana? He was a Vaishnav, far above the division, social circumstances, the division by Varna, far above that. So he was cursed, and that exactly was the spelling of doom and the beginning of Kali, which advented at that point in time. Now, one of the most important aspects that we have to understand as practicing Vaishnavas in this age is that Krishna consciousness, for those who are really greedy, laulyam, who have experienced lobha, greed, for us to be able to make real advancement, we should be able to discard every other consideration and ask for exactly that, because that's exactly what's going to be given. Every other consideration and aspiration should be cast aside, and we should be able to ask for Krishna consciousness. Now, in circumstances where we ask for Krishna consciousness and we ask for bhakti, we want purity, how Krishna is going to make arrangements can be quite unusual. Quite unusual. In the case of Parikshit Maharaj, he just created this situation where overnight this ruler of a massive kingdom had to relinquish his duties and go retire to the forest to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Krishna. You cannot really do it on your own, because Parikshit Maharaj perhaps would not have given up his role. He would perhaps not have given up, the kingdom. He would not have, moved away and sat for listening to Srimad Bhagavatam. But Krishna arranges this. So externally, one may see that all of this seems to be quite strange, that Parikshit Maharaj, who is such an accomplished king, had to behave in the manner he did. But this was Krishna. Overnight, it just happened. So what is it that we have to learn? We have to learn two things. Number one, intensity in life, if it deepens our faith and increases our experience of Krishna consciousness, should always be welcomed. And making advancement in Krishna consciousness invariably happens under tough circumstances. Tough circumstances makes us focus on our identity. It puts things on the table. One may not be serious until they overnight come into news that something drastic is going to happen to them. And then they become very serious and start taking shelter, because now they are going to make up for lost time. It's very rare to make progress, great progress, leaps and bounds, without intensity. And intensity of material circumstances, if it really leads to us becoming far, far deeper and evolving into a greater level of experience in Krishna consciousness, should be welcomed with open arms. That's the path out. Yudhishthir Maharaj, who could have explained that the son of Dharma would actually be losing and pledging his own wife and kingdom in a gambling match? He's the son of Dharma. Did he not know Dharma? What were the circumstances which deluded him that he gambled away his wife, and then that became the root cause of practically setting the stage for the Kurukshetra? It became the root cause for setting the stage for Kurukshetra, because Draupadi was insulted, and that insult became the fuel. It is a great fuel. The Shakti, or the destruction that had to occur, needed power. The power of destruction was facilitated by the humiliation of Draupadi. It was facilitated by the humiliation of Draupadi. So when she became insulted, the circumstances of her being insulted, intense circumstances, the circumstances of Yudhishthira Maharaj being deluded enough to gamble away his whole kingdom, including his wife, including his brothers, and including his own honor. Who could have explained that the son of Dharma could have had such intelligence that he would actually do that? Did he not know better? That's Yogamaya, where overnight they are forced to go and take shelter of Krishna. Overnight. Great power, and then there is poverty, or lack thereof, lack of power. Overnight. What about Lord Rama? Tomorrow is Sri Ramanavami. Lord Rama and Mother Sita. As a supreme person who is a source of all opulence and all knowledge, didn't Lord Rama know how to distinguish whether the deer was golden deer? Was it an object? Was it real or was it Maya? Didn't he have the ability to distinguish? Of course he did. That is Yogamaya again, where she is facilitating his Leela. Didn't Mother Sita, who is the origin of all the universes, she's the mother of the universe, wouldn't she have had the intelligence not to ask for, the deer to be caught? Wouldn't she have had the intelligence to practically prevent Lakshman from leaving? That's again the facilitation of Leela. So one has to take a step back when we are looking at both the lives of devotees and when we are looking at the pastimes of the Lord, which are not comprehended very easily in our minds based on our intelligence. These are not normative experiences where we can just relate to it, saying, oh, I can relate to it, because this happened, that happened. No, these are not normal experiences. The person who is going through it will realize what is happening because they are receiving gifts. Parikshit Maharaj received the greatest gift of being able to be delivered. Within 1 week, he was delivered. Can you imagine that? Within 1 week, he was delivered. Who could have possibly imagined that in 1 week, overnight, he relinquishes his kingdom, gives up everything because someone has told him you're going to die in 7 days? He goes, he finds this extraordinarily qualified teacher, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, receives the most precious of gems of knowledge, all within a period of 1 week. And all of this happens because it starts with momentarily him being overwhelmed with thirst and overwhelmed with hunger, where he acts irrationally and he feels anger, he feels envy, uncharacteristic. And he does things which are unbelievable. He goes and then he puts a snake around a Brahmana's neck. It's very unusual. So now that is being seen in Srimad Bhagavatam. So the lesson that we ought to learn is number one, embrace aspects of life that can bring us closer. Do not be afraid. The gift that is waiting will come with intensity. It has to come with intensity. How else would we relinquish our connections? Would our connections be relinquished overnight? Would it be relinquished, ordinarily? No, it requires intensity. So we accept things which bring us deeper faith, because that is the mark of success in our path. Our path, the mark and the particular element of success is deeper faith. And deeper faith requires circumstances which allow us to be able to surrender. And those circumstances are normally quite intense. And then we become instruments, we become facilitators of the movement. So it's very important for us as practitioners to recognize this. Very, very important. Because it then sets us up in understanding that we are perfectly fine in terms of being able to go through Krishna consciousness. So one never knows what the circumstances are. One never knows what the circumstances are. And if they're intense circumstances, and the intense circumstances result in deeper faith, very good. Right? So that's exactly what we ought to learn as well. So let us read the verses. And I'm just going to read the English for the purpose of time. So we'll begin with English, and then I'll just conclude, and then we will see if we have questions. Once upon a time, Maharaj Parikshit, while engaged in hunting in the forest with bow and arrows, became extremely fatigued, hungry, and thirsty while following the stags. While searching for a reservoir of water, he entered the hermitage of the well-known Shamika Rishi and saw the sage sitting silently with closed eyes. The Muni's sense organs, breath, mind, and intelligence were all restrained from material activities, and he was situated in a trance apart from the three: wakefulness, dream, and unconsciousness. These are states of consciousness. He was only experiencing consciousness in terms of wakefulness, dream, and unconsciousness. He had gone beyond, having achieved a transcendental position qualitatively equal with the Supreme Absolute. So he was qualitatively, he had transcended the material nature and he was meditating on the Supreme Lord. The sage in meditation was covered by the skin of a stag, and long compressed hair was scattered all over him. The king, whose palate was dry from thirst, asked him for water. The king, not received by any formal welcome, by means of being offered a seat, place, water, and sweet addresses, considered himself neglected, and so thinking he became angry. Body consciousness. You see, sometimes when we enter into the temple, we enter into any environment, we start experiencing, oh, are they looking at us? Are they taking care of us? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? Yeah, typical, because that is body consciousness, and this is body consciousness too, which is quite unusual for a pure devotee to experience. It's beyond that. O Brahmanas, the king's anger and envy directed toward the Brahmana sage were unprecedented, being that circumstances had made him hungry and thirsty. So, someone in hunger should satisfy his hunger. That is dharma. So, there's the other reason why people were saying that it is okay for Parikshit Maharaj to have done what he had to do. While leaving, the king, being so insulted, picked up a lifeless snake with his bow and angrily placed it on the shoulder of the sage. Then he returned to his palace. Upon returning, he began to contemplate and argue within himself whether the sage had actually been in meditation with senses concentrated and eyes closed, or whether he had just been feigning trance just to avoid receiving a lower Kshatriya. Now imagine this, where Maharaj Parikshit, with his consciousness, he started thinking whether the sage was actually cheating or was he being sincere. The sage had a son who was very powerful, being a Brahmana's son. While he was playing with inexperienced boys, he heard of his father's distress, which was occasioned by the king. Then and there the boys spoke as follows. You know, Brahmanical curses can never ever be avoided, especially if there's potency. It cannot be avoided. People have to go through Brahmanical curses. There's really no way. A Brahmana cursing, especially if a potent Brahmana, then that curse will happen. It's a part of its Shastric conclusion. You'll read it again and again in different aspects of Shastra. The Brahmana's son, Shringi, said, oh, just look at the sins of the rulers, who like crows and watchdogs at the door, perpetrate sins against their masters, contrary to the principles governing servants. He is practically calling Parikshit Maharaj a dog. And he is saying that he should have been at the door, because in Vedic society, a dog is never allowed to enter the house. It's never allowed to enter the house. For those of you who are dog lovers, I'm sorry to disappoint you. A dog is never allowed to enter the house, because along with the dog entering the house, the dog has the capacity to create a certain level of contamination in the house, which attracts, certain kind of negative entities. The dog has the ability to create contamination, to attract certain negative entities. Okay, the dog's hair, it probably sheds his hair. Some dogs salivate all the time. It has a certain level of contamination which practically introduces an entry level for dangerous entities to come into the house, whom we cannot see. So in Vedic society, dog means outside. So that's why he was using the word, saying he's a dog. Okay, he, like a dog, he should have been outside. He should not have come into the ashram expecting to sit with the master and have dinner. This is the boy, in anger. The descendants of the kingly orders are definitely designated as watchdogs, and they must keep themselves at the door. On what grounds can dogs enter the house and claim to dine with the master on the same plate? After the departure of Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead and supreme ruler of everyone, these upstarts have flourished, our protector being gone. Therefore, I myself shall take up the matter and punish them. Just witness my power. So, Shringi, the Brahmana boy, who is considered to be inexperienced, who is considered to be immature, but who is very powerful because of being born in a powerful lineage to a powerful father, now he is equating himself, saying, Krishna has gone. Because Krishna has left the planet, the so-called people in power are misbehaving. Now, I will teach them a lesson. So he's taking the position of Krishna. I will teach them a lesson, and let's see what happens now. I'll show you my power. The son of the Rishi, his eyes red hot with anger, touched the water of the river Kaushika while speaking to his playmates and discharged the following thunderbolt of words. Imagine this, the thunderbolt of words. He just spoke. That is all he did. But his potency was such that the whole time factor changed for Parikshit Maharaj. He became an instrument. Okay? The potency was such that he was able to change everything. Right? Because he's a Brahmana, so he had the ability and the power and the piety to practically make the change in the time factor to cause all that was caused to Parikshit Maharaj. He was an instrument, but the fact is he had power, so it was pretty unusual. The Brahmana's son cursed the king thus, on the 7th day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched one of the dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, because of his having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father. 7th day, he also specifies the time factor. He has such control that he is controlling Kala. He is saying 7th day from now, Parikshit Maharaj will die. Thereafter, when the boy returned to the hermitage, he saw a snake on his father's shoulders, and out of his grief, he cried very loudly. So, Srila Prabhupada also writes that the Brahmana, the boy, he was also quite repentant because the anger is gone after you curse. The piety also leaves. Everything requires power. So it's like currency. When you have currency and you use the currency to curse someone, there is a depletion of piety. There's a depletion of piety. So the boy, after the anger was pacified, is coming home and he's quite repentant. He is quite repentant of the fact that he had cursed Parikshit Maharaj at that point in time, and he is lamenting. And then he sees his father, and then he sees the snake around his father's shoulder, and his lamentation increases. Now, seeing that lamentation, O Brahmana, the Rishi, who was born in the family of Angira Muni, hearing his son crying, gradually opened his eyes and saw the dead snake around his neck. Until then, the sage had not realized. He threw the dead snake aside and asked his son why he was crying, whether anyone had done him harm. On hearing this, the son explained to him what had happened. So, Shamika Rishi was elevated. He was not even bothered that there was a snake around his neck. And instead, he started asking the boy, why are you crying? Did someone do some harm to you? He did not even consider that that was a situation which was worthy of consideration. The father heard from his son that the king had been cursed, although he should have never been condemned, for he was the best amongst all human beings. The Rishi did not congratulate his son, but on the contrary, began to repent, saying, Alas, what a great sinful act was performed by my son. He has awarded heavy punishment for an insignificant offense. O my boy, your intelligence is immature, and therefore you have no knowledge that the king, who is the best amongst human beings, is as good as the personality of Godhead. He is never to be placed on an equal footing with common men. The citizens of the state live in prosperity, being protected by his unsurpassable prowess. My dear boy, the Lord who carries the wheel of a chariot is represented by the monarchical regime. And when this regime is abolished, the whole world becomes filled with thieves who then at once vanquish the unprotected subjects like scattered lambs. Due to the termination of the monarchical regimes and the plundering of the people's wealth by rogues and thieves, there will be great social disruptions. People will be killed and injured, and animals and women will be stolen. And for all these sins, we shall be responsible. At that time, the people in general will fall systematically from the path of a progressive civilization in respect to the qualitative engagements of the castes and the orders of society and the Vedic injunctions. Thus, they will be more attracted to economic development for sense gratification, and as a result, there will be unwanted population on the level of dogs and monkeys. The Emperor Parikshit is a pious king. He is highly celebrated and is a first-class devotee of the personality of Godhead. He is a saint amongst royalty, and he has performed many horse sacrifices. When such a king is tired and fatigued, being stricken with hunger and thirst, he does not at all deserve to be cursed. So now this is a Brahmana, because this Brahmanical contemplation of Shamika Rishi is also very, it's a signature sign of someone who is in the mode of goodness, highly elevated mode of goodness, okay, if not transcendence. Because there you have the ability to contemplate, you have the ability to remember Shastra, you have the ability to take decisions based on Shastra. Then the Rishi prayed to the all-pervading personality of Godhead to pardon his immature boy. So did Shringi get pardoned? Yes, of course. He was immature, he was a boy. So he is getting pardoned because the Rishi is praying. His father is bestowing his blessing and protection upon the boy, who had no intelligence, who committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate, and who deserved to be protected. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. The sage thus regretted the sin committed by his own son. He did not take the insult paid by the king very seriously. Generally, the transcendentalists, even though engaged by others in the dualities of the material world, are not distressed, nor do they take pleasure in worldly things, for they are transcendentally engaged. So, one who is not body conscious is not going to be bothered if the body is insulted. So the sage Shamika Rishi, he was not body conscious, so he didn't really care about his body being insulted by Parikshit Maharaj by a snake, by putting a garland of a snake. So he was not bothered at all by this particular incident because he was not body conscious. But his son was body conscious, he was envious, he was caste conscious, he was immature, he was not in touch with Shastra. All of this spelled the beginning of the destruction of this extraordinarily powerful Varnashrama system. It spelled the beginning. That was the beginning. Where the Brahmanical class, when they deviate and they start focusing on their birth, then they become deviant and extend themselves to causing great harm to others. Okay, so we'll stop and we'll take questions if there are any. So while we wait for questions, let's quickly summarize. Some of the most important aspects of this chapter were, number one, the evolution of a devotee is highly managed by Krishna. The evolution of a devotee is highly managed by the internal potency of Krishna, not external potency. External potency is Mahamaya, internal is Yogamaya. And when she manages, the circumstances that are created are apparently very, very confusing to a mundane observer. It's very difficult for someone who is of a mundane nature to read through this to understand why Parikshit Maharaj went through what he went through. It's very difficult. But for a devotee, it's very easy to understand that those circumstances were engineered. The engineering of those circumstances, what was caused him to relinquish his kingdom, give up everything, and then within 7 days, he was back with Krishna. 7 days. And how did he go back? He became an instrument of listening to Srimad Bhagavatam. He became an instrument in one of the most phenomenal, or the most phenomenal exchange which ever occurred in the history of mankind, which is the speaking by Shukadeva Goswami and the listening by Parikshit Maharaj to facilitate our own well-being, generations and generations and generations of well-being that will be bestowed upon by this conversation. So this occurred because Krishna decided to bring Parikshit Maharaj back. So when Krishna consciousness, when we have to make advancement, there will be circumstances which may not be comprehensible to the outside world. If the devotee is very sincere and the devotee really wants to make advancement, there might be many incidents in their lives which may not be comprehensible to the outside world, and it will also appear as if Krishna is not doing his job in protecting his devotee. But in reality, the circumstances which a devotee experiences are very unusual, and intensity does occur. And intensity is required for the devotee to be able to relinquish body consciousness and to embrace a higher level of consciousness and to deepen their faith. So the circumstances are being engineered, and as a consequence, the devotee benefits immensely, but external observers would not really be able to appreciate the experience, because internally the devotee is relishing his deeper experience and deeper faith. Externally, it is not being appreciated because people can't understand it. Okay? So that is what is the most important key here, is that our own success in Krishna consciousness is the deepening of our faith. Nothing else is a barometer of success. Nothing else. There's really nothing else that we can do or we are capable of doing based on our own prowess. Our own advancement or deepening of our faith is the key barometer. So you can have a position or you can have a certain role to play in the movement of Lord Chaitanya, and while you're performing that role, from an apparent view externally, you could either be successful or you could be a failure. If you are a success or a failure, externally it doesn't matter, as long as that experience of seva has caused a deepening of faith. This is the most important key that we have to remember. We have to deepen our faith. So for an external observation, Parikshit Maharaj goes through such intensity, loses his kingdom, and goes back in 7 days. But the success is that he becomes an instrument in the mission of the Lord. So that is the most important lesson that we ought to learn from this particular chapter, amongst many others. On one side, so this is a question, on one side, it is said that ignorance is no excuse. Then why Shringi, who was not even ignorant, was still excused when he cursed the devotee of the Lord? His father petitioned him. His age allowed him. See, the Vedic society, age does matter. Young people, if they are considered to be of immature intelligence, they have a different standard as to someone who is older and has the mature intelligence. So, for example, even in the modern legal system, which is considered to be quite flawed because it does make many mistakes. In the modern legal system, if someone is considered to be a juvenile, who is, below the age of 18, I presume, if someone is considered to be a juvenile, then they are tried with a different standard and different kind of punishment is being executed. I mean, different kind of punishment is meted out to them as opposed to someone who is considered to be an adult. And one of the reasons is that it is because of a lack of maturity. So why was he excused? He was not excused. You see, he was not excused from a consciousness perspective. The consciousness of the person would have taken a hit because a Vaishnava is involved. He would be deprived of his ability to be able to serve perhaps for many, many lifetimes. His consciousness would have certainly taken a hit. His consciousness took a hit already when he had developed the propensity to curse Parikshit Maharaj. But more than that, what has happened is that his father, who is quite a powerful rishi, was able to intervene on the behalf of his child, wanting the Lord to forgive him because he acted out of such ignorance. So when children act, the parents do feel obliged because they are responsible ultimately. And the prayers of Shamika Rishi would have been accepted. Secondly, in one sense, it is also being viewed that Shringi became an instrument in several ways. He was also the particular circumstances of the time factor which allowed Parikshit Maharaj to do what he did. So it was all a combination. It was not that Parikshit Maharaj was completely free from fault as well. There was some amount He was not innocent. There was some amount of cause for concern. The issue was on how Shringi reacted. You see, Shringi could have punished him in so many different ways. He could have been disturbed, but Shringi cursed him to die. That is why it was considered to be extreme. So there was motivation, or there was reason for Shringi to be, angry. There was reason for Parikshit Maharaj to be upset because he was hungry and thirsty. So all these factors have to be taken into account. These are special circumstances. Shringi was not with good association. Srimad Bhagavatam says that he had immature friends. So he was obviously, not getting good association, but he was very powerful. So that's how our understanding should be of this. I'm going to give one more minute to see if there are any questions, and then we can end the session. Okay, we'll stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.